The rain tapped gently against the windows of La Bella Fresca, a fancy restaurant in the heart of Atlanta. With cream-colored walls and soft candlelight, the place was a peaceful escape from the city's busy streets. That evening, it was unusually quiet for 8:45 p.m. The air smelled like fresh bread and sizzling butter. At a corner table, Chadwick Boseman sat quietly, trying to blend in. Dressed in a simple black hoodie and worn sneakers, he didn't look like a Hollywood star. Chadwick wanted to be left alone tonight. His fame had become exhausting, and he needed a break from all the attention. The pressure of his career was heavy on his shoulders. Tonight, he didn't want to be a celebrity. He just wanted to be a regular person having dinner. His phone buzzed over and over in his pocket, but he ignored it. Just one night, he whispered to himself as he walked into the restaurant. One night to feel normal. The hostess, a young woman with neat braids, barely looked up when Chadwick approached. She didn't seem impressed by his simple outfit. "Table for one?" she asked without much interest, flipping through the reservation book. "Yes, somewhere quiet, please," Chadwick replied softly. He glanced around the room. The hostess nodded and led him to a corner table. She handed him a menu and walked away without another word. In the kitchen, Miguel Santos was polishing a wine glass. Miguel had been working in restaurants since he was 19. Now 34, he'd seen it all, demanding customers, yelling chefs, and late nights. But tonight had been tough. Earlier, his mom called to tell him the medical bills were piling up again. Miguel's little sister was also counting on him to help with her college fees. The pressure was overwhelming. "Did you see the guy who just walked in?" asked Sarah, one of the waitresses. Her tone was playful but judgmental. "He looks like he got lost on the way to a burger joint." Miguel peeked out at table 14. There sat Chadwick, scanning the menu. "Great," Miguel muttered under his breath. "Another one of those guys. Probably here to order water and sit all night." Miguel wasn't in the mood for difficult customers. He was tired and stressed. When he walked over to table 14, he forced a smile. "Good evening," he said. "I'm Miguel, and I'll be your waiter tonight. Can I get you something to drink?" Chadwick looked up, distracted from the menu. "Just a glass of water, please," he said. Miguel raised an eyebrow. His fake smile almost slipped. "We have an excellent wine list," he said, trying to sound polite. "Maybe you'd like to try a glass of red?" "Just water," Chadwick repeated calmly. His voice was firm but kind. Miguel nodded and walked back to the kitchen. "Water," he muttered to Sarah, shaking his head. "Why do people even come here if they're just going to order water?" Sarah laughed as she prepared drinks for another table. Maybe he's lost. Meanwhile, Chadwick sat quietly at his table. He knew the staff were whispering about him. He could feel their judgmental glances. But instead of feeling annoyed, he found it amusing. For once, people weren't treating him like a movie star. They thought he was just a regular guy. And tonight, that's exactly what he wanted. Miguel returned with the water and set it down on the table. A few drops spilled onto the white tablecloth. "Are you ready to order?" Miguel asked, holding his notepad. "What do you recommend?" Chadwick asked, looking up at him. Miguel's irritation flared. "Everything on the menu is good," he said sharply. "But maybe you'd like something simple? The soup of the day is $12. Chadwick smiled, unfazed by Miguel's attitude. "Actually, I'll have the filet mignon, medium rare, and the lobster bisque to start." Miguel paused, surprised. "The filet is $85, he said, almost challenging Chadwick. "That's fine," Chadwick replied calmly. Miguel frowned as he wrote down the order. "He's going to regret this," he muttered as he walked back to the kitchen. "What's wrong now?" Sarah teased. "Table 14, Miguel replied. He ordered the most expensive steak and soup. I bet he's going to freak out when he sees the bill. Sarah laughed. Or his card's going to get declined. As the night went on, Miguel's frustration grew. Every time Chadwick asked for something, Miguel felt more annoyed. When Chadwick asked for ketchup with his steak, Miguel couldn't hold back. "You know," he said sarcastically, "there's a great burger place down the street. Might be more your style." Chadwick smiled again, his calmness unshaken. "Thanks for the suggestion," he said softly. Nearby diners began to notice the tension. A couple celebrating their anniversary whispered to each other about the rude waiter. A group of business people at another table watched curiously. Miguel's attitude was out of line, and everyone could see it. By the time dessert came, Miguel was openly rude. "Next time," he said as he cleared Chadwick's plate, "you might want to try McDonald's." The restaurant fell silent. Diners nearby held their breath, waiting to see Chadwick's reaction. But he didn't get angry. He simply smiled again, as if Miguel's words didn't bother him at all. In the kitchen, the staff were gossiping. "Who is this guy?" Sarah asked. "He's so calm. It's weird." "Probably some wannabe," Miguel replied. "Thinks he's fancy because he's eating here." When Miguel brought the bill to table 14, he was ready for the awkward moment. The total was over $400. He was sure the customer wouldn't be able to pay, but Chadwick didn't even blink. He pulled out a sleek black card and handed it to Miguel with a quiet, "Thank you." Miguel's confidence faltered as he took the card. It felt heavier than a regular credit card. He glanced at it, and his stomach sank. This wasn't an ordinary customer. As Miguel processed the payment, Sarah leaned over and whispered, "Do you know who that is?" Miguel shook his head. "Just some guy with too much money." Sarah gave him a strange look but didn't say anything. The rain outside grew heavier and the restaurant started to empty. But Miguel's mind raced as he began to suspect he had made a big mistake. The rain outside grew heavier, and the restaurant's soft hum began to quiet as more diners finished their meals and left. Miguel's hands felt clammy as he held the sleek black card. There was something about it that didn't feel ordinary. He glanced back at table 14, where Chadwick Boseman sat calmly, a faint smile playing on his lips as he looked out the window. Sarah's strange look lingered in Miguel's mind as he ran the card through the machine. The transaction approved instantly without hesitation, as if the number on the bill were nothing more than pocket change. Miguel's stomach twisted. He had a nagging feeling that this customer wasn't just some regular guy trying to show off. "Are you okay?" Sarah's voice broke through his thoughts. She had been watching him from the bar, her expression a mix of curiosity and concern. "Yeah, I'm fine," Miguel replied, though his voice wavered slightly. He handed Sarah the receipt to put away, but his mind was elsewhere. Sarah leaned in closer. "I'm telling you, Miguel, there's something about him. You should apologize before this gets out of hand." Miguel scoffed, though it lacked his usual confidence. "Apologize for what? Being honest?" He didn't seem to care. Sarah narrowed her eyes. "You're playing with fire. Mark my words." Back at table 14, Chadwick quietly finished his water, his calm demeanor unshaken. The rain continued to pound against the windows, filling the silence in the nearly empty dining room. Miguel hesitated before walking back to the table. His steps felt heavier, and his usual self-assured attitude was nowhere to be found. "Thank you for dining with us," Miguel said stiffly, placing the receipt folder on the table. "I hope everything was to your satisfaction." Chadwick looked up, his gaze steady but kind. "The food was excellent," he said simply, his voice carrying no trace of malice. "And the service, well, it was honest." Miguel's face flushed. He wasn't sure if that was a compliment or a veiled criticism. I appreciate that," he stammered, unsure of what else to say. The words felt hollow, and he could feel Sarah's eyes burning into the back of his head from across the room. Chadwick's faint smile grew just a little wider. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small notepad. Flipping it open, he jotted something down and then tore out the page. He folded it neatly and slid it across the table toward Miguel. "Here," Chadwick said. "A little something to think about." Miguel blinked, confused. He picked up the folded note but didn't open it right away. Thank you," he mumbled. Before he could say anything more, Chadwick stood, slipping his phone into his pocket. "You have a good night, Miguel," Chadwick said warmly, patting him gently on the shoulder as he passed. The gesture was so unexpected that Miguel stood frozen, unsure how to react. The door jingled softly as Chadwick left, disappearing into the rain. Miguel stared at the note in his hand, his heart racing. His fingers trembled as he unfolded it. Inside, written in smooth, careful handwriting, were just a few words. "Always treat others with kindness. You never know their story." Miguel's stomach sank. Guilt washed over him as the weight of the evening's interactions hit him all at once. He'd spent the night judging a man based on appearances, assuming he was just another arrogant customer trying to show off. But there had been something different about Chadwick from the start. A quiet dignity that Miguel now realized he had mistaken for simplicity. Sarah approached cautiously, noticing the change in Miguel's expression. "What's it say?" she asked, tilting her head to read the note over his shoulder. When she saw the words, her eyes widened. "Miguel, you need to Google him. Right now." Miguel frowned. "What are you talking about?" Sarah grabbed her phone and started typing furiously. A moment later, she turned the screen toward him. Miguel's eyes widened as he saw Chadwick Boseman's face staring back at him from dozens of headlines. "Beloved actor and humanitarian," one read. "Black Panther star changes lives on and off the screen." Miguel's chest tightened. He felt the color drain from his face. The man he had spent the night insulting wasn't just anyone. Chadwick Boseman was a Hollywood legend. A man known not only for his acting, but for his kindness, generosity, and humility. "Oh no," Miguel whispered, sinking into a chair. "Oh no, 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 what have I done?" Sarah placed a hand on his shoulder. "Maybe it's not too late," she said softly. "He didn't seem mad. Maybe you can fix this." But Miguel wasn't sure. He had a sinking feeling that this night would haunt him forever. The rain outside showed no signs of letting up, and neither did the storm brewing in Miguel's mind. He clutched the note tightly in his hand, its simple message now feeling heavier than anything he had ever carried. Miguel's mind raced as he replayed every word he had said to Chadwick that night. Each sarcastic comment and dismissive gesture echoed in his memory, sharper and louder now that he knew the truth. Sarah sat down across from him, her face a mix of pity and urgency. "You need to do something," she said, her voice soft but firm. "He left a note for you. That's a sign he's giving you a chance. Don't let it go to waste." Miguel looked at her helplessly. "What am I supposed to do? He's gone. I don't even know where he went." "He's Chadwick Boseman," Sarah replied, as if that explained everything. A man like that doesn't just disappear. But to Miguel, it felt like Chadwick had vanished into the storm outside. He stared out the rain-streaked window, his chest tightening with regret. The note in his hand felt like both a gift and a curse, a reminder of how easily he had let his frustration cloud his judgment. The restaurant was nearly empty now, the quiet hum of the dishwasher, the only sound breaking the silence. Sarah stood and gave Miguel a nudge. "Go clean up table 14. Maybe that'll clear your head." Miguel reluctantly rose to his feet and shuffled over to the table. As he picked up the glass of water and folded napkin, he noticed something beneath the plate. It was a second note. His heart skipped a beat as he carefully unfolded it. The handwriting was the same, smooth and deliberate. "Kindness is free, but it changes everything." Miguel stared at the words, his throat tightening. He sat down heavily in the chair, the weight of the night pressing on him. For years, he had carried resentment and frustration, letting it seep into how he treated others. But here was a man who had every reason to lash out, who could have easily humiliated him, yet chose kindness instead. The door jingled, and Miguel looked up, half hoping it was Chadwick returning. Instead, it was the restaurant manager, Thomas, stepping in from the rain. Thomas paused when he saw Miguel sitting at the table, the notes clutched in his hands. "Miguel?" Thomas said, his tone sharp. "What are you doing? The shift isn't over." Miguel stood quickly, tucking the notes into his apron pocket. "Sorry, boss. I was just cleaning up." Thomas narrowed his eyes. "What's going on? You've been off all night. And who was that guy you were serving? He seemed familiar." Miguel hesitated. He wasn't sure how to explain everything that had happened. "Just a customer," he said finally. "But I think I made a mistake." Thomas sighed and rubbed his temples. "You're always making mistakes, Miguel. But if it was a customer, you'd better fix it. We can't afford any bad reviews." Miguel nodded numbly and returned to the kitchen. Sarah was waiting for him, her phone in hand. "Look," she said, showing him an article about Chadwick's latest humanitarian work. "This is who you were talking to tonight. He's not just an actor, he's everything you're not." Miguel winced at her bluntness but couldn't argue. "What do I do, Sarah? How do I make this right?" She shrugged. "You've got his words. Start there. Maybe the kindness he showed you is a lesson you need to learn." For the rest of the night, Miguel worked in silence. The weight of Chadwick's notes stayed with him, each word etched into his mind. As the last customers left and the restaurant closed, Miguel found himself standing outside in the rain, staring at the empty streets. He pulled out the notes and read them again. "Always treat others with kindness. You never know their story. Kindness is free, but it changes everything." The words felt like a challenge, a call to be better. Miguel clenched his fists, the cold rain soaking through his uniform. He didn't know if he would ever see Chadwick again, but if he did, he wanted to be someone worth meeting. The next morning, Miguel woke up early, his thoughts still heavy with guilt and determination. He found himself searching for articles about Chadwick Boseman, reading about the actor's life, his work, and the impact he had on so many people. Each story painted a picture of a man who gave selflessly, who used his platform to lift others up. By the time Miguel arrived at the restaurant for his next shift, he had made up his mind. He couldn't undo his actions from the night before, but he could start making changes. He greeted each customer with genuine warmth, listened carefully to their requests, and treated everyone with the respect he'd denied Chadwick. Sarah noticed the difference immediately. "Who are you, and what have you done with Miguel?" she teased as she passed him in the kitchen. Miguel smiled faintly. "Just trying to be better." The day passed quickly, and Miguel felt a strange sense of relief. For the first time in a long while, he wasn't weighed down by anger or frustration. He wasn't perfect, but he was trying, and that felt like a step in the right direction. Later that evening, as Miguel was wiping down tables, the door jingled. He glanced up, his heart stopping for a moment. There, standing in the doorway, was Chadwick Boseman. He was dressed just as simply as before, his calm presence filling the room. Miguel froze, unsure of what to do, but Chadwick smiled and nodded at him. "Good evening, Miguel," he said, his voice warm. It took a moment for Miguel to find his voice. "Mr. Boseman," he said quietly, stepping forward. I don't know what to say." Chadwick's smile widened. "How about starting with hello?" Miguel laughed nervously and nodded. "Hello." Chadwick gestured to a table. "Think you could spare a minute to sit and talk?" Miguel hesitated, glancing at Thomas, who was watching from the bar. But the manager gave a small nod, and Miguel sat down across from Chadwick. For the first time in years, Miguel felt truly seen. And for the first time, He was ready to listen.